There is perhaps no more contentious subject in every culture in history than the subject of love. Especially nowadays in our modern post-60s culture, love is thrown around for some of the most pretentious things. Some of the most horrendous actions sometimes are justified by love. And if I had a nickel for every time someone came up to me and said, well, Jesus told us to love, as if he said nothing else in the gospel. Or if I had a nickel for every time someone came up to me and said, Father, we don't want to hear about these messages or this gospel story. We want to hear about love, then I wouldn't need to be in this job. I'd be rich. But maybe that's why I do need to be in this job, I and other priests. Love is thrown around as just this catchphrase, this key word, in some cases the great legitimizer. People talk about freedom to love. People talk about new types of love. There's even a song that says, all you need is love, which, by the way, is the gospel of John, Paul, George, and Ringo, not Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But believe it or not, we have a Messiah, as we hear in today's gospel, who commands us to love, for better or for worse, I suppose, in our current culture. But the manner in which we understand love as followers of Christ is very, very different than what society likes to push and tout as love. And when people often quote Jesus to legitimize their particular agenda or perhaps their lifestyle, shows a misunderstanding of the biblical connotation of love. About midway through his papacy, Pope Benedict XVI wrote an encyclical on love, Jesu Caritas Est, Jesus is love. How many here have read that encyclical? No, keep them up so I can count. Not many, and perhaps I shouldn't blame you. Papal encyclicals and other Vatican documents tend to be very long and sometimes very tedious reading. But early on in this encyclical, St. Benedict talks about 3 ancient Greek words that are used in the Bible, which we translate into the single word of love. Remembering the Bible was not written in English, nor was it written yesterday, and by the way, it wasn't written in the 60s. But 3 Greek words are translated to the one English word, love. One of those Greek words is eros. Many of you might have even heard the god of love named Eros, one of Aphrodite's children. And it is from this word that we get the phrase erotic. Don't worry, this is not going to be a PG-13 rated homily. Eros was the most common word for love used in the ancient Greco-Roman world. But it is the least used word for love in the scriptures. In the New Testament, which was written in Greek, eros is used a total of 0 times. In the Old Testament, which was not written in Greek, but eventually translated to Greek, eros is used only twice. So in the entire Bible, and only in the Old Testament, eros is used twice, the most common word for love used in the ancient Greco-Roman world. The second word that we find in the Bible is the word philios. And philios is the love between 2 very good friends, or a group of very good friends. For example, Jesus says, "You are my friends if you do what I command you." The love he speaks of his apostles is that love of a very strong friendship. In light of that, I'd like to clarify something. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson were not lovers. Ernie and Bert in Sesame Street are not lovers. Frodo Baggins and Samwise Gamgee in The Lord of the Rings are not lovers. They have a very strong friendship between the two. The third word used, believe it or not, is the least used word for love in the ancient Greco-Roman world. But it is the most commonly used word for love in the Scriptures, which tells us that even back then, as it should be today, our Christian understanding of love is countercultural. And that word is agape. Agape. And it means simply a complete giving of oneself for another. And as Jesus says in the Scriptures, there is no greater love than to lay down your life for your friends, to give everything for your friends. And this is the love we speak of when we remember the love that Christ has for his people. Think about it. The Son of God, who is God, because he loved us so much, a love of all creation, but especially for those created in his image and likeness, emptied himself of his divinity and became a human being and experienced death. And not just any death, but one of great violence, one of great suffering, one of great humility. Ponder that for just a minute. God died because he loved the pinnacle of his creation, humanity, made in his image and likeness. He gave everything, gave of himself in everything. And that is the agape that is most commonly used in the Scriptures and least used in ancient Greco-Roman society. This is the love we are called to have for one another. This is the love that Jesus says what he means when he says, love one another as I have loved you. He doesn't mean it in the erotic sense, in the sensual, physical sense of pleasure, orientation, and gratification. He means it much, much more than the love of friendship. And this love that is expressed by Christ for his holy people is witnessed to and sacramentalized in the holy sacrament of matrimony. That is the love that is shared between a husband and a wife. And think about what is promised. The eros is obviously present and must be. That is how we have children. That is how the faith is passed on from one generation to the next. And I'm always amused when every now and again on Facebook a friend will post on the anniversary of their wedding, "Today is the anniversary when I married my best friend." But I hope it is much, much more than that. Because what is promised, for better or for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death. It is a mutual self-giving between a husband and a wife in which each spouse has in their best interest the good of the other spouse. And that is the agape that Christ calls us to live and is sacramentalized in the bond of matrimony between a husband and a wife. Of course, today when we think of love, we tend to refer to it in the eros sense, in the physicality, the pleasures, the orientations of how we best like to achieve self-gratification. And eros in many ways is very inwardly oriented toward pleasure, biological physicality. Christ calls us to a different love, one that is outward, looking toward the good of others, giving of oneself for another. And Jesus says, this is how you know you are my disciples. This is how others will know that you are my disciples, by your love for one another. It's very easy and very common for people to fall into the eros, the ancient Greco-Roman pagan understanding of love. And especially when that interpretation of love is affected by one's children or other family members who enter into sometimes lifestyles or want to justify sometimes very sinful behavior under the auspices of love, and sometimes even quoting Jesus as saying, "He told us to love." But what that only demonstrates is a very blatant disregard or just a simple misunderstanding. A flagrant misunderstanding, but a misunderstanding enough of what Jesus means when he says, "Love one another as I have loved you." And we are called to exercise that same love for each other. This is the love that is shared between a husband and a wife. This is the love that is given to one's children. This is the love we are called to have as a community of faith, all in deference to the love we have in a total self-giving to God and his command. Let us be renewed as we hear Christ again tell us in today's gospel a very, very well-known, often quoted, and usually misunderstood command. Let us love one another, not merely in the physical sense of self-gratification and pleasure, in which we speak of orientations, proclivities, much, much more than the love of friends, that loyalty between two good friends. Let us be renewed in the call that we have been given by Christ to love in the biblical sense, in the Christian sense, which today as then is nothing less than countercultural, and must be countercultural if we are to give an authentic witness to the command of love that Jesus has given us. But let us hear again his command. Let us live it as Jesus meant it. Let us express it as we are meant to, as people made in the image and likeness of a God who shed everything to die on the cross and save his creation made in his image and likeness. Let us hear and understand and bring fully into our lives that basic command of Jesus, which is as much new then as it is new today, as it is counterculture always. Love one another as I have loved you.